So one of the things that's sort of come up in conversations that we've had, both within VSTE but also outside of VSTE, is this notion of sort of long-range strategic planning and how these digital transformations take place. As we've heard several different times throughout today, often, you know, it's shiny, it's new, and we bought 50,000 of them and gave them out, and surprisingly enough, that didn't work. Or, you know, we bought everybody a whiteboard and 5 people used it, or so on and so forth. And so I think divisions, with funding being an issue, have become more strategic. But what we pulled together today was a panel of folks to kind of talk about what they're doing with that kind of long-range strategic planning in their school divisions, particularly around these ideas of digital transformation. And so we've got 3 folks here today. Like many of the other sessions, they'll have a few words to say about their school divisions, and then I may have some questions for them, but we certainly would love to throw this out to the audience as well. If you have questions or comments or things that you're doing in your school division that you would like to talk about. So joining us today are Diane Harazin, and Diane is the Supervisor of Instructional Technology in the Prince William County Schools. She is also a new member of the VSTE Board of Directors, so we're happy to have her. Oskar Scheikl is Director of Information Management in Rockingham County, and so you of course heard Dr. Shiflett this morning talk about their transformation, but we asked Oskar to come on board to talk a little bit more about project management and how that's working. And then finally, Tina Kiracofe, she is the Director of Instruction and Technology from the Augusta County Public Schools. And VSTE's been working with Augusta County over the last 2 summers to do some professional development towards their digital transformation. And so when I was there this summer, I thought that'd be a great person to hear from too. Like, how do all these pieces of professional development and purchasing and planning and implementation sort of make that big picture of strategic planning? So again, we're going to go ahead and hear from each of them, and then throw it open to questions and other comments and so on and so forth. So Diane, go ahead and take it away.
Well, I'd like to talk about Prince William County a little bit. We're the 2nd largest school district in Virginia. We have 95 schools, about over 87,000 students. We're pretty big. I guess device-wise, we have about 45,000 devices on our network. We do encourage BYOD. Our bandwidth is not where it needs to be, I don't think, at this time, but it's getting there. So sometimes it's a little difficult to add more devices onto our networks. There was a really big initiative a few years ago to make sure every classroom had an interactive whiteboard. And I agree that a lot of times it's used as a glorified, just a whiteboard, but not necessarily taking advantage of the power of the software that goes along with it. Our school district offers a wide variety of academic programs for our students, a lot of specialty programs. We have, you know, schools that focus on STEAM, focused on IB, fine arts, technology information. We have Project Lead the Way, which is, you know, kind of a STEAM program. We have elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools that have a world language focus. So we offer some great things for our students. Our current state, when we look at starting to transform what we're doing in our schools, is that we have a lot of innovative leaders in our school. We're site-based managed, so our principals really take those reins and really move their schools forward the way they want to. So we don't really have a unified vision district-wide. Every school is known for their own little pet projects. So eventually, we would really like to have that unified vision, common vision, same vocabulary, moving our district forward as a whole rather than this school is going over here, this school is going over there. So that's a real big issue right now. We also have some concern about how are we preparing our students for their college and career. What is that? Do we have a common set of skills or knowledge or attributes, characteristics that we want to make sure we are instilling in every student that goes through Prince William County? Again, we don't have that common one vision. We did take the Future Ready promise. Our superintendent did sign that a couple years ago. The problem with that is there's no action plan. There was no structure in place for us to move forward with that whole idea of being future ready. We do have limited digital content in our district. It hasn't been a focus. So the need for using technology is really not there. We have some schools that want to do a one-to-one program, but there's no need for these kids to take their devices home because the teachers aren't teaching that way. We don't have the content yet ready for them to make it a need. The kids have to have a device at home. I want to get us there. I'm very fortunate that I work with a director who has an instructional technology background. She is now our information technology director, but came from instruction. So it's nice that she has brought that instruction to the forefront. So everything that we do in our office in information technology services is focused on that student, on that, what are we doing for those kids? One of the things that she did when she was in my position as a supervisor was that she changed the name of our instructional technology resource teacher. We are now instructional technology coaches, bringing more instruction to the forefront, talking about getting these ITCs out of the rotation so that they're more available to coach and be that instructional leader in a school. We also move towards more a cloud-based resource and as a division. A couple of years ago, or last year, the year before, we didn't really have one cloud-based solution like Office 365 or a Google Apps for Education. So they made the move last year to really focus on one, which is Office 365. So as a division, we are moving in that direction with everything is Office 365. We're trying to provide resources, professional development tied to that. So that's good. That's one thing that we're all agreeing on that we're moving forward. We also introduced the SAMR model, and we're trying to do that as a whole division. We focused a lot on middle school, and it's an expectation in middle school that teachers really reflect on their own practice and where they are with SAMR. And we are also working with our elementary and high school. They're just 1 year behind our middle schools, but that's nice. We have that one focus. We're still all over the place, but it's nice that we know we can move things division-wide. We got to get all our stakeholders in place. You just stopped me. I can go on for days. One of the things that we've been doing, we do know we need to have our leadership behind any initiative that we want to move forward. And the problem is, there's a million initiatives that our superintendent has, but we need to get all of our stakeholders involved in coming up with what is it that we want to accomplish and really focus on our graduates. What type of graduate do we want to be producing? So we have been looking at different organizations to kind of help us in our journey. We've talked to Chad Stevens. He was an educational strategist with CDW, and I think now he's with Amazon. I'm not sure. Did you know Chad Stevens? Then we started working with, we read the book by Eric Scheikl, The Digital Leadership, and we started following him and sharing his ideas with our instructional technology coaches and our administrators. Then we started looking at Modern Teacher, and we've been having a lot of conversations with Modern Teacher, and then there's another one called, let me see, what's the other one's called? Hold on. Yeah, it's getting there. The International Center for Leadership and Education, that's where, Eric Scheikl works with them. And so we're looking at these different programs to help us strategically move forward. We do have a strategic plan, but we don't have an action plan. We don't have a timeline. We signed the Future Ready Promise. We don't have an action plan or a timeline. So there's a theme. We need accountability. So we're looking for an organization that'll help us with accountability and getting all our stakeholders involved, getting our leadership especially involved, and to move us forward. So we're just at the very beginning stages of a transformation. We know where we want to go. It's just we don't know how to get there. So that would be my piece as a beginner.
I'm Oskar Scheikl, and I work for Rockingham County Schools in the Shenandoah Valley in Harrisonburg. And we are in year 3 of our digital conversion roadmap that you maybe saw earlier this morning when Larry Shiflett, our Director of Innovation and Learning, was on a panel. And despite the fact that we're in year 3, we're not one-to-one anywhere. And the reason for that is that our plan was built on making sure that everything we needed was going to be in place by the time students received devices. And so we do have a very specific roadmap, what will happen when. And what's interesting about our roadmap was that early on in the first school board meeting where we talked about this, it was talked about just like in most school divisions, and that is, it started with a question about content. What are we going to do with content when we go away from paper tech-based textbooks? And so Kevin Perkins, who's our technology supervisor, and I basically gave a presentation, that was very careful, thinking small, just in terms of, what we can spend money-wise. And we said, we can't get a $10,000 budget increase. What are we going to propose here? And so we came up with a very small proposal, and here's what you can do with open resources and so on. And then interestingly enough, just one of the board members said, why don't you all start thinking a little bit bigger? And what should this really look like? And I said, well, if you want to know what this really should look like, give us a couple months and we'll tell you what this really should look like, but we'll also tell you what this really will cost. And so they gave us a couple months, and so Kevin and I spent the time researching case study after case study. We had the advantage that a lot of school divisions, school districts across the country had already tried these kinds of approaches. None of this is new. And so we had enough examples of school districts where this worked well, and we had enough school districts where this ended up in some kind of failure, whether it's failure based on the lack of bandwidth, whether it's failure based on a lack of technical support, instructional support, or professional development for teachers. And so we spent just lots of time reading. We looked, at a lot of the organizations, COSIN, and some of the others that were publishing guidelines for what best practices are. And then we went back to the board, and initially when we talked about this internally, there are a lot of people who laughed at us. People at central office, people who used to work in our department, and they said, none of this will ever happen. And I said, but they asked what this really should look like, and so we're going to tell them. And gave a board presentation that outlined a plan, how you do digital transformation based on best practices. And the first response we got, so it had all the components. You have to make sure your infrastructure is in place. You have to make sure there's both technical support and instructional support. ITRTs in many school divisions were then used as testing coordinators. We said we need to be back where ITRTs are instructional support to teachers, and we need one for every building. We need technical support in every building. We need to make sure we meet all the bandwidth requirements for the next, 5 years at least, as we know them. We need to make sure professional development, there's dedicated money, because that has always been cut. And we need to talk about instruction, first of all. We can't, why is this that the technology director is up here giving a presentation with the technology supervisor when we're talking about what we try to accomplish for our students? And the first response from the board was predictable. Okay, so if we were to do a one-on-one, what would the device be? And we said, okay, don't ask that question, because it's not about technology. This is about learning. And he said, no, we understand that, but if you had to make a guess, what would be the device that you wanted to have? And we said, stop asking that question. Really, we don't have an answer, because part of the process would be to pilot devices and see what really works for our students. And slowly but surely, the school board was really the first group that was completely on the same page in terms of language. Okay, if we want to do this, let's do it the right way. Let's talk about instruction. As a result, one of the first steps we took was to create a position of Director of Innovation and Learning. We cannot do this as a technical department without support from instruction. And so Larry, who you heard earlier in the morning, was hired. He was a former elementary principal, middle school assistant principal, former teacher. And so we were able then to work on a plan together that was heavily focused on learning. And so in the process of developing the roadmap in detail, we immediately made sure that when we talk about learning, that the content coordinators were heavily involved, that we talked to the business community, that we talked to our funding bodies, and had conversations right away about, what the needs are in this day and age for students. What do they need to learn? It's not about specifics. You don't need to necessarily learn a specific operating system or, even computer skills. What do we want them to learn in terms of, creativity? And so there were quite a few open discussions, with the business community, with community groups, and with the Board of Supervisors, what they had in mind for the children of Rockingham County. And we worked very hard before we ever made a decision about which direction to go in terms of the technology, to have common language, to have common goals that were supported by everyone in the community. Our Board of Supervisors had taken a trip to Silicon Valley, and they came back with this list of skills that employers there were looking at for hires. And they said, okay, this is what we heard. And we said, well, this is exactly what we've been talking about. There's a good match between what you want, what we want. Let's work on this. But you have to realize, this doesn't come for free. And so, again, with every group, we talked about our plans, that infrastructure would have to be in place. We would never spend money that wasn't spent well, even if the initiative couldn't continue. So what happens if after 3 years funding dries up? What will we have in place that wasn't a waste? We made promises that we would budget in a way that we would not ask for more money. So every year we've given back money to the Board of Supervisors. We budget, obviously that meant we budgeted, high to make sure that we really could cover it, but we said we're not going to ask for more. And so again, every year we found ways to save money and then return that. And we worked with our content coordinators and with Larry and with our ITRTs and with our principals on coming up with common language, common goals, with a plan of what we wanted to achieve in terms of learning. So we put in money for professional development. That meant the last few years we've been able to send 50 teachers to VSTE every year. We've taught graduate classes. Larry and I did a graduate class in digital age school leadership to all of our principals. We've made it a topic in our administrative staff meetings to go away from just information presentation, so that just like students, administrators wouldn't just consume information. We would talk about instruction more again in our administrative staff meetings when all the principals were there. We were going to hire technicians, hire ITRTs, build out the network, and try out a number of different devices. So for those first 2.5 years, we were able to put 8 pilot projects into our middle schools, then 8 pilot projects into our high schools, and now 15 pilot projects into our elementary schools, where different teachers could try out different devices. We said, are we really limited to a one-on-one if we're talking about the technology? So some of our schools got to try out a 2-to-1, where they would get a Chromebook and an iPad mini, for example, for every student to try out, what that would make possible, because that's still, in terms of financial commitment, less than a MacBook Air. And so nothing was going to be off the table. We always wanted to make sure, wherever our research leads us, wherever our experience leads us, that all the discussions have to be possible and that we wouldn't take anything off the table. And it became really exciting, and a really exciting process. Our supervisors, even with the funding request, we basically quadrupled our budget request for technology from year 1 to year 4. The supervisors, once we had them in our buildings, watching band students compose on an iPad, they all can relate to music. We showed them what this could look like, and they're like, oh, wow, this really isn't the school environment, that I was in the 1950s. Right? And so they were quite excited about what the potential actually was. And, business leaders, we brought them into the buildings. We had teachers visit other school divisions and so on. So we needed to make sure that the vision was there of what this could look like. And then the financial aspect was simply a matter of saying, is this important enough to do it? And there were times when we said, no, this is how it's done well. And then the political questions come, well, what if we give you half the money? And we said, keep it. We don't want, if we're asking for $1 million for this year, and you only can give us 500,000, keep it. We don't want it, we're not doing it, because it won't be done well if we only have half the money. And so there was kind of this constant building of relationships with the funding bodies and with the school board to say, you know, we really mean this. This isn't just some project. Look at how it's done. Here is the research. This is what other school divisions experienced. And so that relationship building became a big part of it. And in the end, when we handed out devices to our teachers a couple of weeks ago, I think it was one of the best moments, you know, in addition to the school board members speaking, one of the members of the board who was very reluctant initially said, you know, we have a Republican board of supervisors, basically, in a very conservative county that had proposed a tax increase to fund digital conversion in Rockingham County. And he said, and I was so ready for all the phone calls and for all the pushback from the community. And he said, none came, because the parents knew that, okay, the extra money they're going to pay in taxes goes directly to students. It's not paid for some program they can't relate to. They know what their children will get in return. And he said there was no pushback from the community. And so it's been an amazing process. We'll see how it goes from here, you know, once the students have the devices. But, you know, having kind of the commitment in the beginning to say, let's see how you do it well, and let the data and the information and the research guide the process, was the biggest step for us. Once everyone agreed that that's what we would do, then you could look at the data, look at the research, and say, well, if we want to do it well, this has a greater chance of being successful than another approach. And so that's what we've done, and so far so good, but we'll see. Again, we'll talk again in a couple of years and see where we are, but we're pretty happy with the process so far.
Great. Tina, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Tina Kiracofe, Director of Instruction and Technology for Augusta County School. Augusta County is a very rural school division. We cover about 1,000 square miles. We have 11 elementary, 4 middle, and 5 high schools in that area. And we only have 8 ITRTs. Now, they're the most amazing ITRTs you can find, but we do only have 8. We continue to try to grow those numbers, and we have about 14 computer techs. Our transformation started about 5 years ago when our school board visited Mooresville, North Carolina, and decided that was something they were interested in. And quite honestly, they were more worried about the device than the process. But as a school division, we've continued to push the idea that this needs to be an instructional transformation as much as a digital conversion. So after our school board had visited Mooresville, they were sold on the idea of a digital transformation. We began working on that, and fairly quickly we went right into a pilot in one of our middle schools, and we started with MacBooks. That turned out to be one of the things we learned from. We figured you don't need a MacBook just to access the internet, which was what the majority of our classrooms were doing in the beginning. Since that time, our first year we went to a 2-to-1 digital transformation at our middle school. We call it 2-to-1. We have 2 students for every 1 Chromebook, or a 50% saturation rate. And pretty much we followed the same set of activities each year. We worked on the infrastructure, we worked on our professional development in preparation for rolling out the Chromebooks the next year, not only to our teachers, but also to our students. We tried to give those devices to our teachers in advance so they had time to become comfortable with the new device, and to plan instruction using that device. So the first full year, middle school students had the Chromebooks in their building at a 2-to-1 rate. The following year, we moved to the high school, and this year we have achieved that 2-to-1 ratio at our elementary schools. Staff development is definitely one of the most important parts. We've tried several different ways of going about that. Not only do our ITRTs work on that on a daily and weekly basis within their buildings, but we've also tried to do some staff development from outside our division. So the first year we used Google. They were the ones that did the professional development for our middle school teachers. We then moved to VSTE. If you ever need professional development for your staff and you want to partner with someone who can provide that structure, much like what we had for today's conference with all of the online sessions, being able to make your schedule. And the best part is Karen finds all of those presenters. And the majority of them are from the state of Virginia. They know what our curriculum looks like. They know what our standards are. They know what our teachers are facing in the classroom. And that was one of the most positive experiences that we had. So VSTE presented to our high school teachers 2 summers ago. This past year, they actually did 2 separate days because we have so many elementary teachers. And our elementary teachers came in for a full day of professional development with the VSTE staff. We have continued to work on our bandwidth. As Oskar said, that is critical. It doesn't help if we can't access those programs and those resources online if we don't have the bandwidth. So we've continued to make plans to expand our bandwidth. We have started to dip a big toe into the one-to-one take-home initiative. This year, we have 2 7th grade levels, one at Wilson Middle School and one at Beverly Manor Middle School. Those students have been given a Chromebook. They take that Chromebook home each night. They bring it back each day. That is their Chromebook to use for the year. We just started that. Actually, I think tomorrow is the 1-month mark, and we are just starting to do some surveys with both students and teachers. And it's been interesting to see what students as well as teachers think about that process. Students want us to allow them to have access to absolutely anything they can find on the internet, and they'd like us to make sure that everybody has Wi-Fi in their home. So I'm not sure we'll be able to work on that right away. We are a very rural district. We have been able to work on allowing students to edit offline and to use some offline features for their homework. But about 81% of our students say they have internet access at home. And teachers are excited about the opportunity to have the Chromebooks in their classroom every day, where before they may have to coordinate with their team in order to have access to the Chromebooks on a daily basis. So I'll stop there. We'll see what questions they have.
So questions, audience questions.
Don't all ask at once, there's only 3 of us.
So I'll kick it off. How about that while you're thinking of generating your question? And I'm going to direct it to Oskar just because. So if you go to the Rockingham County Public Schools website, you've carved out a whole section on your digital conversion. Yes. It seems like you've gotten lots of good local press. Have you pushed that, or are they there? I mean, in addition, because as you're working with this conservative community, that opening up the paper and seeing the kids all took it home and, you know, looked at porn or something like that is a much different story than look at all the great learning that's going on.
Yeah, everything we do, obviously, you know, we invite media. So we've had parent visitation days, you know, in the evenings where for our pilot classes, parents were invited, media was invited, and I think it's the community, in terms of the conservative, that really only played into kind of the fiscal aspect, you know, being a little bit more reluctant to spend money. In terms of a community, Rockingham County is a great community, and I think that's why we were able to do what we are doing, because we were able to work in an environment where there isn't inherent distrust between the Board of Supervisors, the school board, and school staff. Now, the Board of Supervisors, to some extent, you know, they're careful when they spend money, and so, you know, I think that's where that conservative part comes in more. Members of the board, for example, insisted that we treat this as a separate expense from the regular school budget, which is, of course, technically it's not, but what happened was that the school budget was approved by the Board of Supervisors a couple of years ago, and then we were given the opportunity to make a separate presentation and say, we want, in the long run, you know, whatever the price tag is, you know, $3 million a year in addition to what the budget is, and here is what we need it for. And so then every year since then, we've made presentations, what we spent it for, where we saved money, and every year the Board of Supervisors says the same thing, treat this as something different. So if we add $3 million to the budget, you can't just buy a new bus with it, right? And that's where that conservative, you know, fiscal stance comes from. But there's still that trust that, when we met with members of the board of supervisors and, we had these conversations, it's a very close-knit community. Despite the fact that it's, in terms of square miles, I think the third largest county in the state. But people really take a look at that community and they want what works for the kids. And we have, newspaper reporters and TV reporters who aren't in it just for a sensational story or to catch us doing something wrong. So we have a very good relationship with the media in terms of, hey, you want to highlight this? And they're more than happy to report on things that are good in the community. And so it's a really nice environment to work in where you don't have to always fear that everything gets spun the wrong way. We do see it where, every time we watch a news story, we say, oh, really? That's what you focused on? That's what you got out of that 5-minute conversation? But a lot of times that's just inexperience with the education environment. And now we have a very young reporter for our newspaper. She looks like a middle schooler. One time at a parent event, we told another newspaper, oh yeah, here's one of our middle school students. She didn't know that. And so they tried to interview her and she said, no, I'm a reporter for the larger newspaper. But she does a great job. She does a great job finding the essence of what we're trying to say. And so it's just really good relationships. Our school board chair at the time, Dan Breeden, and I did a presentation to the Virginia School Board Association. And really that's all we focused on is building relationships. It's taken a decade before digital conversion to build that relationship. They have, lunch with their counterparts, Board of Supervisors and school board. They prepare, their budget booklets for them. Everything is open and transparent, and we don't say we're going to spend it on one thing and then spend it on another. And, some of these were really individual meetings where you sat in a conference room with one member of the board, and all they wanted to know is at the end of that hour, can I believe what you say? And that's what it really comes down to. And so, we try to build relationships with everyone. With the business community, one of the things that we hear frequently from the business community is, we're glad you're taking a slow approach. You're doing this deliberately over 5 years, not rushing into it. And that makes perfect sense from a business stance, to think through what you're going to do and to have that plan. And so relationship building is pretty much the most important thing we do to make this all happen, because then when you screw up, as you eventually do, with something, that goes wrong, then it's not that, oh, now we got you. It's more like, okay, how do we overcome that? And members of the board have said that. You run into a roadblock, you let us know, and we'll see how we can figure out to get extra funding if we need it. So.
And Tina and Diane, I didn't mean to leave you out of that. I just happened to be perusing your website looking for your link to share on Twitter. Comments about building those relationships?
I think in Augusta County, we've had to work hard at that. We haven't always had that relationship between our school board and our board of supervisors, and we have reached that point. A lot of times it's just those open conversations and providing that time to have conversation, to know that, again, it's the trust. Can we trust you to do this? So that has benefited us not only in the digital transformation, but in some of the building that we're doing with our schools right now as well. So Oscar's right, that's key.
And I'm fairly new and just trying to learn how everybody works together. And so far, I haven't seen that yet. I think it's really hard for us to get someone to listen to us above. So we're really trying to make the case that we need to change our course. And so AJ, that's my director now, we're really trying to articulate what it is we really want to ask for. But I really do admire those relationships and in that smaller environment. I don't know, we're so big, it seems we're so big. I know there are other, Fairfax is bigger, but, and plus it seems we're bigger because we have, every school is its own little entity. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to bring all of them in as well. So getting your administrators involved, you had to get buy-in from them as well.
Right.
How does that all?
Right, and Rockingham County has a long history of school-based decision-making, and so that's not easy, right? And so one of the things we did was to basically say, okay, again, we've helped schools. For a long time, they would decide, they would raise money from the PTA for a piece of software, or they would get, a set of iPads through, funds that they raised. They had to buy their own projectors, or and all those things. And we said, okay, we'll take care of it. We will take care of it at central office. We will find the funding. We will help you with those things. But we also need to talk about learning. And we can't talk about it if we all speak different languages.
That's it.
And so that was one of the main goals of Larry and I deciding to teach that class on digital age school leadership. It wasn't that we needed to talk to them about leadership. If they needed to learn about leadership, why are they principals, right? But it was about common language and how students can gain, those new skills, all the C's, in terms of creativity and collaboration and critical thinking and so on. How do we go about that? And just let's talk the same language. And then slowly you can say, okay, now you have to understand if we ask for, $500,000 for content, we can provide it, but it has to be a give and take. Schools will have that input. We always look for input, and it's not just that we say it, we really mean it. So when we decided which device to get, the day of our decision, I thought it was going to go completely differently than it ended up going. And part of the reason it went the way it did was because we had parents there, we had students there, we had teachers there, administrators. Everyone from the school community was there, and students had an equal voice in telling us, what they found the advantages to be. And that's the same with principals. So I think we create an environment where we hope principals understand that we're not making decisions because we like telling them what to do, but because there has to be some balance between what we can buy as a division and what the individual school needs are. And so maybe just because you like this one math program, maybe that compromise is possible if then there's also the understanding that, we say, this is the program we use consistently. That means teachers are more interchangeable. If a teacher needs to transfer from another elementary school, they know what the division's software is. Our ITRTs can help if they don't have to learn 75 pieces and only have to learn 25. And so, yeah, it's never simple, right? And that's just what I mean. It's taken a long, long time to build that respect, and we respect our principals, and we hear what they say. And so we change based on their input. And I think as long as people see that once we agree what we want the outcome to be, that's, can we agree that maybe this is one way to do it? And yeah, maybe in the end you'll say, I told you so, right? But we're okay with that. And that's just the nature of the environment. And so I think, yeah, you take some risks that way, and over the long term, I think the division's done a good job hiring people who are flexible in that way.
That's good.
And so if you have those principles in place, then I think it makes everything easier. And then the last 3 or 4, they'll eventually come along.
I would just add that those relationships with the principals are also very important. And I think when we have slightly smaller numbers than what you would have Prince William, so it's much easier to develop that relationship and that trust, and they look to us to sort of give them that guidance. And of course, they don't mind the devices either. In Augusta County, budget is always an issue. And so as a very rural division, our tax rate is even lower than Rockingham's, and in some ways I think they're even more frugal. So we find ourselves compared with Rockingham County in many instances. Another aspect is that the principals and the school communities have been very appreciative of the devices that the division has provided, but they've also gone out on their own in order to find additional ways to add to that. So in some of our schools, you'll find that their 5th grade is already at a 1-to-1 because they've been able to work with some community sponsors in order to purchase additional devices. We've been very fortunate also to work with one of our local manufacturers, Diane Applied, which is in Verona, and we've worked with them some. They've been on our tech committee, and they've given us about $30,000 in donations so far, which is big for us. It's big for Augusta County. So Principals have also really appreciated the professional development that we've provided and worked with their teachers to provide that. One of the best professional development that we did was actually our middle school teachers and our ITRTs put on a tech share fair for all middle school teachers. And so when you have teachers presenting what they do in the classroom, motivating their colleagues the way that they did during their little tech slam, and then giving them time during that day to learn a new technology, strategy, or tool, practice using it, and then develop a lesson in which they would use that device, that tool, or that strategy, we found that to be very beneficial too.
Yeah. I would say in terms of decision making, I think one of the key pieces also is to make sure that when you ask for input from different groups, that it's really input. You know, I hate it when I go to a meeting because they need representation from the technology department and the decision's already made. And I'm there to just say what I think, but I never get the sense that anyone's listening. Right? And so, you know, we work on that at every aspect. We have monthly meetings with ITRTs and content coordinators, so it's a conversation. We have an Envision team that includes an elementary principal, middle school principal, high school principal, director of innovation and learning, assistant superintendent, superintendent. I'm on that committee, and we really, everything that gets proposed, there's an hour or two of conversation. And so I think, again, we have to be comfortable at central office to say, no, what the principals, they made a good point. Let's not do what we thought we could do. Everyone has to be open to not getting it their way at times. And that's the hardest part, because every principal has an ego. You know, you talk to high school principals, I mean, they rule their world, you know, but that's true for the superintendent, you know, and that's true for us too. We all think you know, if we do it my way, it's going to be great, right? And it's just not that way. So it's amazing the number of times I've changed my mind, you know, in the course of a couple of weeks sometimes, based on, you know, a student telling us something or just watching a lesson. And so that's also the most fun I've had in my whole career, is to always, like, you never know what you're going to encounter the next day and how it can inform the decisions you're going to make. So.
I love the idea about you including the students. That's such a critical piece. We forget them a lot of times, but I think they're the most important voice we need to be listening to. Mm-hmm. We don't make the time to do it.
Go ahead, and I'm going to come down here with the microphone so that we can hear your question.
I have a big teacher voice.
There you
Yeah,
go.
but we need to pick it up on the
voice.
audio.
Use your
So
50-foot voice.
this is good for me. I need to exercise more anyway, right? My Fitbit died of boredom, so.
Yeah, you started to speak, Tina mentioned professional development. I'm just curious to hear from the other two members. What are you doing for professional development for your teachers and staff?
So as part of the digital conversion budget, we said we needed money specifically tied to this initiative. So we have a $100,000 budget a year just for digital conversion, professional development for teachers. What we did initially was what others have done. Go to Mooresville, see a school division that's in the national news. Let's see what they do. And but then from there, we funded attendance at conferences. We have annual, or actually 2 times a year, we conduct what's called Tech Toolkit Academy, where ITRTs and teachers present and have interactive lessons with teachers. We bring in guest speakers here and there. We send principals to conferences. And so it depends on what's needed at the time. So early on, you know, with middle schools, for example, being the first schools to go one-to-one, we focused a lot of the professional development on middle school teachers, middle school administrators, brought some elementary and high school folks along, and then we shifted as that goes along. But we set money aside, and every year we simply ask, you know, what folks think they need in terms of professional development. Can we provide it in-house? You save all the travel costs, you can do more of it. If you go to conferences, you know, you have to be a little bit more careful who you send and where you send them. But we fund substitutes, so teachers can visit other schools for a day and we pay for the substitutes, you know, things like that. So whatever teachers feel they need, just watching a colleague. We say, okay, you can do that, and we'll pay for the substitute out of our digital conversion professional development budget. So it's a number of things. The graduate classes, one of our staff members teaches 3 classes a year on, 21st century learning tools or Google-specific classes or Chromebook-specific classes, whatever it is, the graduate class for administrators. All that's paid for with the digital conversion PD money.
Great, I'm looking around.
Oh.
Questions, comments, things you're doing in your schools that you want to share?
Karen, I'll just share that.
Go ahead.
It's on? I don't think it's on. Can you all hear me okay? One of the things, sorry, that one's on. One of the things that we have continued to do is we're looking for those ongoing professional development opportunities with our ITRTs being in the buildings at least weekly. They're working with all of the staff members and trying to set goals, and that's part of my ITRT's SMART goal is how are they able to show growth with their teachers. So we're doing a lot of the Google certifications, the Google Apps certification. So are they level 1, are they level 2? And that led us to thinking about the TSIP form, which somebody brought up this morning in another session, and we all giggled. But my ITRTs have sort of rewritten our TSIP form, and we're looking at categorizing those tech skills as entry level, intermediate, or advanced. My point with teachers being, we don't always know what we don't know, especially in the field of technology. So by showing the teachers, this is your entry level, here's an intermediate level, but here's advanced level, they may think that they've already learned all that there is to know on a certain topic, but what they don't know, they don't know. So we're encouraging the ITRTs as well as principals to work with teachers and have them self-assess, determine what else do they need to learn, what are they interested in learning that would be applicable to their classroom, and then work with the ITRTs or any other staff that would be able to help them master those new skills. Thank you.
Prince William is also taking advantage of having an ITC in all of our buildings, and they have access to our professional development catalog, and so they can structure their courses so that teachers can get recertification points. We worked on visioning this year with our ITCs, where we want them to have a vision but with an action plan, so that there's some accountability for where they want to move their school, and then their professional development should be tied to that. So I think we're very excited. We have quality ITCs in every building. And they're doing the bulk of the PD. We are working with our curriculum folks as well and offering different types of PD. We're doing some virtual things. We have a science cohort where we're going to have virtual online training. Like every Thursday will be Science Thursday. And so if you tune in between 4 and 6, you'll be able to see a live broadcast of a science teacher sharing some innovative idea that they've done in their classroom. It's just something very short. It's not even an hour. I think we schedule an hour, and it's whatever. It's going to be questions and the tool. We hope to expand that then to our English and social studies and math teachers, so that at least one day a month there's some snack or some slam or some innovative idea that's being shown to teachers by teachers.
Oh, great. Here you go.
We put in classroom sets of laptops, starting with science teachers 6 through 12, 4 years ago. Then 3 years ago, 6 through 12, we put in a class set of laptops, 25 laptops, plus the teacher laptop in the history teachers. And then 2 years ago, we did the English, and then this year we've done the math. And our process is that hopefully by this time next year we'll be in a one-to-one situation, because those original science laptops will have aged out, and now we supposedly should have enough to take care of at least our middle school students at this point in this process. But one of the other things we were looking at is a BYOD program to see if that can offset our budget shortfalls that we have. And I'd like to know if you're looking at that, have looked at that. I know you're Rockingham County, your road went to exit 6. I don't know where you are now, or exit 3, or whatever it is. But in addition to that, we're also looking at if it's a BYOD, how the infrastructure needs to be to accommodate that. And this year, we started a help desk for our teachers and students because we found out I don't have but 5 technicians, and I have 3 ITS, instructional technology specialists, for 15 buildings. So I can't get everybody dispatched where they need to be. So if you could, I said 2 questions, that's basically 3. But these are things I'd like to know where you are, if at all, to help wherever possible.
So I heard BYOD, tech support, and your ITSs, or your ITRTs, or whatever flavor you're doing. So BYOD first. Diane, I think you mentioned you're encouraging BYOD. What does that look like?
Well, I think our difficulty right now is our infrastructure. So we have a 1 gigabyte backbone, but network. It's not where we want to be, and our schools are feeling it. So when kids are bringing in their own devices, plus the devices that are already in the school, it does impact what's going on the network. So we do have a few schools that are newer that have been renovated that can actually handle student devices, but so we do allow it. It is, kids can bring their own devices. It is up to the teacher as to how they want to use them. But right now, if we can get over the hump, which you already said, the infrastructure is critical. So we've got to find the funding to increase that. We're actually going to double it this year to 2. Woo-hoo! But we're still not where we need to be. So that's probably one of the first things when we start looking at our transformation. We need to have that in place before we can get all those other things going.
So you got 3 choices: BYOD, tech support, and I think we've talked a fair amount about your ITRTs, but.
Yeah, we've had a BYOD policy in place for a number of years now. One of the drawbacks that we see, well, there's really 2 that come to mind immediately. One is many teachers don't feel comfortable having students with, 6 different devices in their classroom. They can't be of any help in that case. And secondly, there's no good filtering when students, the policy says students have to be on the network, but for a teacher to check every student's device to make sure it's in our instructional network, that's a no-go. So the kids end up on 4G LTE, and who knows, what they're sharing in that huddle over there in the corner. So, that's a major concern for us with BYOD, and we've had cases where we then had to confiscate devices or have the police involved, in terms of what students were accessing during school hours. In terms of help desk, for our middle schools now, where students will have devices, we will have a help desk that's comprised of a technician from our staff and then a school lab assistant. And we're considering at the high school to create a class that's so students can staff the help desk and get credit for it, and in the process learn both troubleshooting in terms of hardware, but also, some web development skills, things like that.
Did you go to Mooresville? Both of you go to Mooresville?
Yeah.
Did they not have a BYOD policy where they wanted kids to bring in their own devices and then they'd supplement with school devices? Were the majority of, no, they weren't?
That's one, yeah.
Did they have one? I thought the majority of the devices were
No, in Mooresville, the students each have a device, all the way down to 3rd grade, I think.
provided by the district.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree that BYOD is a double-edged sword. It's just difficult. It's more difficult. We actually have more problems not with kids getting on things they shouldn't be on, but they're able to access things that eat up our bandwidth when they're not on our network. So that's an issue. As far as your tech support, we also have a help desk system. Kids are not able to put in help desk tickets. That has to go through a teacher. And a lot of times our ITRTs are able to help troubleshoot, much to their dismay sometimes, but they are good at helping with that. And I think we would like to eventually have a class of students who are able to help with that. I know that's one thing Mooresville talks about a lot. Mooresville is a fairly poor and small division, yet they're able to do so many things, but they have students trained to help work on computer issues as they arise.
Did that help a little? Okay.
Our help desk system we have is, basically I was allowed to hire 1 person and I was able to find 2 for the price of 1. So I put those two people as our help desk. And so we developed, I have a very ingenious Longwood University graduate that went through our system that came back, and I hired him as a network administrator. And he wrote our help desk program where we have a happy face that says help on the desktop that he put together, and they hit that icon, and what it does, it comes directly to our help desk. It gives us all the background information as to what the laptop is, when it was repaired last, all the information necessary, and then there's a chat line as to what their problem is, so that, and we can remote right into it. And basically, in about 90 seconds, most all the problems, over 60% of our problems are handled very quickly like that. And it's been very blessed to have that, but I didn't know what else everybody else had. I'm not trying to brag, I'm just saying that we brought in a BYOD. That's where my network administrator just basically said if that happens, he was going to walk off, and that's what I would lose is the maintenance of that help desk part. So I was trying to get some information.
I know it's a huge issue. People ask me kind of what's a good ratio, and I believe in business it's 1 tech support per 50 devices.
Right.
So do the numbers in your school division now that you are going 1-to-1, or if you're counting BYOD devices, and we're just ridiculously far away from that. And I think it's just an area that no one sort of talks about it because it's a fruitless conversation sometimes. So we are 1 minute away. Again, this could probably go on for another hour as folks have comments and questions. Let's thank our panel, please. And I know all of them would be open to chatting further or even school visits or those kinds of things. Let's stop going to North Carolina and come to Virginia schools, please. So we got one more session from 3 to 4 this afternoon, but you got a couple minutes. There's all kinds of food back here. There's lunches, there's coffee. Eat, people. Thank you very much.